Welcome everyone to this juicy gathering to discuss a very, very important topic that I think has a lot to do with what's happening in the world right now on Temple Priestesses. This is a deep and rich topic, and so I'm excited to dive in with you all. They're part of my deeper teachings on the dark feminine when I hold space for women leaders to do the work of dark feminine alchemy together in sisterhood. And I could feel it rising up that it was time to talk about it now because we're living in these intense times. And I could feel this like beckoning from these temple priestesses of the past, calling all of us forward. And so I asked on my Facebook page last week, like, who knows about temple priestesses? Is this common knowledge? I wasn't quite sure. I knew there were many women who did know about them, but I wasn't sure if everyone did. And I said, you know, are you interested if I do a Facebook Live on this topic? And many, many, many women said yes. So I'm excited to have this conversation and really look at how this relates to the dark feminine and then also why it's important for these times. So I am beaming in live to you from the big island of Hawaii. I live as a digital nomad, and so I came here in February, I thought for a few months, and I've been here for many, many months, riding out the pandemic, but of course, thrilled to be here. So I'm on a 7-acre farm. That's the farm right there. So you may hear lots of farm noises while we're on today. There might be dogs and chickens and ducks and all kinds of birds. So we've definitely got some aloha coming in to be with us today. Now, this is the first call in a series this week, a 3-part masterclass on the call of the dark feminine. And so I wanted to create this space to invite women to get to know more about the dark feminine and to hear her call. So we've got our call today on the Temple Priestesses. We've got a call tomorrow on dark feminine as activism and leadership, and then a call on Thursday about entering the dark feminine temple. For those of you who may be interested to hear more about the dark feminine program and want to hear how it's set up, what it's all about, ask me questions if you'd like an information session, if you will. So let's kind of begin to hear the call. It seemed to me that this was about a pulsing in our bones from the past in regard to the temple priestesses, and a pulsing in our soul in regard to our purpose around call 2 for activism and leadership, and then a pulsing in our bones to come together in sisterhood. So just inviting everyone to take a couple of deep breaths, because this is a deep and rich topic, and it may touch lots of old remembering for yourself, deep in your bones, in your DNA, in your marrow. Awesome. Okay, so if you are with me live, I'd love to hear where you are in the world. Please chime in. I will be keeping an eye on Facebook to see if people are chiming in. Oh, I've got some comments already. Stacy says hi. Nate says, you look gorgeous. Thank you. Also looking forward to this. Great. So thank you for being here. And let me know where you are in the world as well, because I think it's interesting for us to feel each other in the sisterhood spanning the globe. Okay. So first off, it goes without saying that we are in very intense times right now. No matter what your political beliefs are, no matter what's happening for us in regard to the pandemic, it's intense. And so I personally feel that this is all the dark feminine calling our name in the pandemic, because the dark feminine comes in with her sword of truth and love to slice away all that does not serve, to initiate us into her realms of death and rebirth, because nothing new can be born without something old dying first. So we are in a time of old ways dying, and I believe we need to learn how to work with the dark feminine to understand how to fall apart instead of trying to hold it all together, so we can find the next level of power and purpose that we're stepping into in our businesses as women leaders. As I like to say to my clients, fall apart fast and die well. not something we've ever been taught, but this is one of the lessons of the dark feminine. So I believe that we're being asked to think outside the box in our leadership. And instead of like the traditional ways of doing business, like we need to toss that shit out and figure out like a new way that is resonant within our bones and resonant with our natural design as women as well. You know, my body of work is called the Feminine Operating System. And I say that I help women leaders reclaim their raw feminine power and learn how to use it in the natural design of their feminine operating system. We women operate differently from men. And so it's important for us to understand our natural skills and abilities so that we can do business in a way that feels sustainable instead of the hustle and the grind to make things happen and then getting burnt out and, you know, adrenal fatigue and, oh my God, the list goes on and on. So that's the backstory. And then now let's dive into the conversation on Temple Priestesses. Okay, so the Temple Priestesses were women from an ancient time who knew the value and potency of their sensuality and their sexuality and were in devotion to the divine through their bodies. And so it's interesting. There's not a lot of content out there about Temple Priestesses. I have looked, I've only found a few pieces, and I will share what I've learned, and because I find it absolutely fascinating. And I believe that many of us women in this day and age who are called to devotion of the feminine, who are called to deeply explore our sexuality and our sensuality, I personally believe that we have this ancient remembering of that time of being a temple priestess. Whether or not you believe in past lives, there's certainly an archetype of this sort of a woman who is deeply connected to the divine and values and worships her own human form and can connect to the divine through that channel. So these women were representations of the divine on earth, and they lived together in the temple, and they would do their work through their bodies in sexuality and sensuality, almost as like as a sacred practice. And so throughout history, unfortunately, they often got labeled as sacred prostitutes. And so we can see this in what happened to Mary Magdalene through the Bible. Mary Magdalene is thought to have been a temple priestess. And unfortunately, then she got labeled like not even a sacred prostitute, you know, through the eras, the eons, she got labeled just a pure prostitute. And not that there's anything wrong with that, with sex workers using their bodies to, you know, express themselves in the world and create a living. At the same time, there's a difference between sex as ritual act and sex in exchange for money, right? So there's a difference there. And so I think, you know, what happened is in that era, these temple priestesses were in their full sovereignty. And I believe these were times where women did not have their full sovereignty outside of the temple. You know, they were probably the property of their husbands, but these temple priestesses did not go through that same experience. And so they had a lot of power. And so you can imagine, of course, that when religion came in, you know, kind of distancing all of us from our own power and our own wisdom within, that they had to do something to take away the power of the temple priestesses and even women in general. And so they began to think that true spirituality was really more about spirit and nothing about the body. And so we've all been suffering by that disconnect that happened and lost sight of our power as women because all of our power lives down in our bodies. So I'm just slowing down to feel my own body and want to keep an eye on comments too. And also I invite you to as well that if something stands out for you and you want to mark that, please put it in the comment section. I believe that that's a way to help us digest and get it a little bit deeper for ourselves. And then also we're doing it in community, right? So it's a way for us to gather as a sisterhood. You know, I'll say that I know many of you watching have your own relationship and experience around the temple priestess. I want to deeply honor your wisdom with that. I am by no means an expert in this category. I have my piece of the puzzle to add in. And you know, what I always like to say is that I don't think there's any one woman on the planet that has this figured out to be in our raw feminine power and in our feminine operating system. I haven't met them out there. And I think the only way we're going to figure this out is if we begin to open source this as a sisterhood. And so that's where, like, I'm not going to tell you that I have it all figured out, but I will tell you that I'm going to keep creating spaces where we can come together to figure it out as a sisterhood. So I want to deeply honor the aspect of sisterhood, the wisdom within you. And if you want to share some of your wisdom in the comments too about what you know, let me share a little bit more about my pieces of the puzzle, but then please bring in and add to the conversation with whatever your wisdom is as well, so that we can open source this as a sisterhood. Okay, so here's some of the wisdom that I found around the Temple Priestesses. One of my favorites was something that I'd heard. I was in the orgasmic meditation world and was trained as one of their coaches. And so the orgasmic meditation world, taught by One Taste, would talk about how there was a temple of Ephesus, and this was a temple of the Temple Priestesses. And they would talk about how when the men would come back from war, before they would go home to their wives, ravaged by their experiences at war, they would go to the Temple of Priestesses, and the Temple Priestesses would, and I quote, fuck the war out of them and send them back out as love. And that has always deeply touched me, because I think as women, we've forgotten what a power we have and how much of a gift our feminine radiance is. So I want you to think of these men who had wounding, you know, physical and emotional, I imagine, and spiritual, who would go to these Temple Priestesses who, my understanding is, would make love, and that in that process there would be a healing that would happen. And this was a service that these women were doing to the world, to the communities, so that these men wouldn't go home and then bring their wounding into their families. So I'm like, feeling chills throughout my body around that. So that's one of the pieces that I have deeply loved, because I think there's something deep there around us remembering the power that we have and the alchemy that we can create to transmute darkness into light. So that's one piece of the puzzle that I've found around Temple Priestesses. Another piece I found is that there were snake priestesses, and I believe this was on the island of Crete. And so these women in training would allow a snake to bite them, and they would take small amounts of poison, of venom from the snake, so that they could build up their tolerance over time, so that eventually they could allow themselves to be full on bit by a snake, and then allow it to be a shamanic journey where they would then get wisdom for their tribes. The first time I heard that, I was like, excuse my French, but motherfucker, that's hardcore. And so this brings up a point of what I've heard a woman named Carolyn Elliott called the poison path. And I believe this is out there as common knowledge, that there's something about, and this is where the dark feminine comes in, of like, how do we take in poison and transmute it? How do we take the lead and turn it into gold, right? Like, how do we allow our snake to, a snake to bite us, and that venom doesn't kill us and instead takes us closer to God? Whoa. Right? So that's another piece of the puzzle for us to look at, is really feeling into that. And that's where I think the dark feminine starts to come in. And, I know many women have their own relationship, as I mentioned earlier, to the Temple Priestesses, and that many of you women have done a lot of education and exploration and research around your own sexuality, and have explored how your sexuality can be healing, that it has a transformational force. And I have done some of that myself. And I will say that my piece of the puzzle to bring in is about the darkness piece. Like, how do we learn how to embrace the darkness? Our own darkness we have to learn how to embrace first, so that then we can be of service in the world to help transmute the darkness that's out there, because goodness gracious, the darkness is off the charts right now out there. You know, for those of us in the US, the divide is so intense. Oh my God, between the red states and the blue states. And I mean, it goes on with masculine and feminine and black and white. I mean, it's just like the divide is so intense. And I personally believe that one of the teachings of the dark feminine is that what's happening in the outer world is a reflection of what's happening in our inner world. Now, this is not to say that we need to take responsibility for everything that's happening in the outer world. Let me be very clear about that. The way that I teach this is that we're looking through two lenses. There's the human lens, and then there's the spiritual lens. I call it the badass priestess lens. And so through the human lens, you know, we are at the mercy and the effect of a lot of what's happening in the world. And we need to feel our feelings about that, and we need to get into action and activism, and we need to do all the human things. However, through the badass priestess lens, I believe that we need to see what's happening out there in the world as a reflection of what's happening in our inner world. And so if that outer world is, as I like to say in a very technical term, wackadoodle, and there's so much divide happening out there, then I personally want to show up to do the work to see what kind of divide is happening inside of me. And so this is where I'm starting to lay in how I think this is so important during these times, that we begin to understand our ancient lineage of the Temple Priestesses and learn how to use it in this time. Because if we can begin to activate that ability, can you see how we can be of service to the world? Can we figure out how to, again, I am going to swear, so apologize for any kids around, but it's for emphasis and it's part of my natural speech, but can we fuck the world and fuck the war out of the world? Can we be a part of this sisterhood that gets into action with all the powers that we've been preparing for decades for some of us? Like, that's the invitation. And, you know, it also reminds me of the Buddhist practice called Tonglen, right? So many of you have probably practiced this. And the basic practice is where you breathe in pain and then you breathe out love and light. And you're often invited to do this with someone that you know is suffering. You can do it for yourself, and I think you can also do it for the world. So you can start to see that there's a lot of expressions of this poison path out there in the world. And so I think it's time for us to embrace this poison path so that we can be a part of the change. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if we learn how to embrace our own darkness so that we're not afraid of it. We don't avoid it. We don't stay super busy. We don't create a lot of unconscious drama in our life. Like, we don't leak our power, and we instead learn how to use our power so that we can, you know, I feel like we've been in training for this for a long ass time. Like, it's time to put it into action, but that means we need to train, I feel. And that means I believe that we need to come together in sacred spaces of sisterhood. And so that's partly why I'm creating my space around the dark feminine experience for women leaders. And I don't care how you do it. Like, I just know that we need to be activating this in this time. Okay, I'm gonna take a pause. I know I haven't checked in on the comments. I wanted to follow that thread. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Thank you to everyone who's here. I appreciate your presence and being part of this conversation. Use our power rather than leak it. Yep. What kind of divide is happening inside me? Yep. Let's see. Well, let me show all the, don't stay super busy. Don't create drama. Oh, that's good. Okay. I'll riff on that for a hot second. So I talk about with the dark feminine that there are signs of what it looks like when we are avoiding the dark feminine, which to me is synonymous with avoiding our darkness, synonymous with avoiding our emotions, synonymous with avoiding our shadow, right? Like I should probably say that. So my definition of the dark feminine is basically your deepest yin, you know, like the feminine is naturally dark. Did you know that? I mean, if you think about the Chinese cosmology and the yin-yang symbol, the feminine is represented by the black side of the symbol. And so the feminine is naturally dark. And you can think of the moon and the womb and like the black fertile soil of compost. There's nothing scary about these things. They just happen to be in the dark. And unfortunately, as a culture, you know, we've been conditioned to believe that dark is bad, but it's not. That's where our power lies. Like the dark feminine comes in to, I believe, to de-armor our, to teach us how to de-armor our raw feminine powers so that we have it to use for our purpose. So in that process of working with the dark feminine, we need to learn how to embrace and master our emotions so we can love them and ride the wave. We need to learn how to die fast, you know, fall apart fast and die well. We need to learn how to go into our shadow and embrace those disowned parts of ourselves. We need to learn how to be comfortable in our raw feminine power and reclaim and unleash more of it, because we've certainly been taught to suppress it. And we also need to learn how to get into our turn on and the taboo, because all of this is where the power starts to come in, and we need the power for our business. So that's the backstory. So what it looks like when we avoid the dark feminine is we stay really, really busy as a way to be like, oh, I'm just super busy, then that's all right. I can't really do those things. I don't have time to really feel. And it's unconscious, right? Like none of this is wrong. I call these our mechanisms. And it's important for us to just learn our mechanisms so that we can see when we're doing it. So staying super busy, creating drama in our outer life, like raw feminine power must create. You either use your raw feminine power to create for your purpose, or it leaks out through holes in your container and creates drama and havoc in your life instead. So I call those power leaks, right? So if you've got a lot of drama in your life, generally it's because you're not using your power for your purpose. Also, you know, if we're castrating the men in our world, we're not listening to the dark feminine to step into more of our receptive yin side. Oh, I'm forgetting. I did a whole video about this. And there's a couple of other ones. Oh, health issues like burnout, adrenal fatigue. That's, I believe, when we're trying to like hustle and grind instead of like listening to the dark feminine to learn how to get into our feminine power. And even, I believe, depression and anxiety. You know, that's a managing of our big emotions generally. So I know these are gross generalizations, and so I understand that they may not be easy to hear for some. And these are my theories, having been in the healing arts for 20 years and worked with lots and lots of people. I was trained in body work. I'm not a trauma expert, but I was trained in trauma, and I do bring in a lot of pieces of that puzzle because I'm so passionate about power, like passionate about power and passionate about purpose. And something happens for me when I feel a woman just lit up in her power and purpose. Oh, it's so intoxicating to me. So that's why I'm bringing forth this dark feminine work, because I believe that we need her in order to step into our deepest power and purpose. Okay, so that's a little bit about the dark feminine. So now let's bring it back to the Temple Priestesses. And this would be a great time. If you have some wisdom that you want to add in about the Temple Priestesses, please do. Someone says, yep, to all of this. I have been deep in this work, unraveling, rewilding. Thank you for speaking eloquently on it. Awesome, thank you. This is really speaking to me today. Adrenal fatigue, depression, anxiety. I definitely feel those when I'm avoiding. Someone else says, this is nailing me today, the staying super busy. Yes! Well, I'm sorry, I'm not that you're staying super busy, but I appreciate you sharing that. And of course, it is fun when a person feels nailed, because that means that I'm on their spot. So I bring all of this forward because I believe that it's time for us to turn toward our darkness and fall in love with our darkness and learn to work with our darkness and then turn on our darkness. And you can see that that's what's happening with the Temple Priestesses. They were able to be with these wounded men coming back from war, and they could turn towards the darkness, they could love the darkness, they could learn how to work with the darkness, and they learned how to turn on the darkness through their own channels. But I don't think that we can do that if we haven't gotten comfortable with our own darkness first. Now, I'm sure many of you are very empathetic souls. Like, me, right? So especially if you've been in the healing arts in any capacity or as a coach, you know that sometimes when you hold space for someone in their darkness, it can be intense because you might take on some of it, or it might kind of stick to you a little bit, right? Well, here's the thing. This is my theory. Again, I've been in the healing arts and energy work and the body mind connection and like all of that for 20 years. Like I am a geek about this stuff. And what I've discovered, or what I believe, is that no darkness can ever come to us or stick to us if we aren't a resonant match for it inside of us. So I need to really let that land. Because I know I've been in the healing arts for a long ass time. Like I've heard about the, I don't know, what do they even call them these days? Like an attachment or, like all these like negative souls and things that can happen. Like when we have the negative energy, I know there's names for it. I'm glad I blocked it out and can't think of them. I don't think any of that can happen unless you have the darkness inside you first. This is the physics of the universe. Like something can only come into our field if we're a resonant match for it. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. We all have darkness. I have to deal with darkness all the freaking time. It's when we ignore and avoid and deny our darkness that the problem happens. Instead, what I teach in my Dark Feminine program is everything is feedback. So if there's darkness coming into you right now, that's feedback that you need to do some cleanup on aisle 5 to like look at some of your own darkness. It's just an invitation. Like it's not wrong or bad. And really at the end of the day, ideally, we fall in love with our own darkness and we get off on it. This is how you get free, y'all. It's like not by becoming happy all the time. It's by being happy with everything exactly as it is and getting off on it all. Period. So in the Dark Feminine work, what we'll do is like, or I'll share from my own experience. Let me take a sip of water, actually, hang on. Some of you may have noticed I sent out, I made a post on Facebook and also sent it to my newsletter list saying, I am a narcissist. Can I tell you how fun it was to say that? Now, meanwhile, I've had some journeys of being in relationship with narcissists, so it's certainly not something that I find attractive. However, what I was doing was looking at seeing what was happening in the world and my judgment of, let's say, some of the leaders, certainly in the US, and being like, well, you spot it, you got it, Morassi. So if you see a narcissist out there, where's your own narcissism? And this doesn't mean that I'm the same level of narcissist as what I'm seeing out there, but it does mean that there's some sort of resonant match inside me if I'm judging it outside of me. And so one of the ways to get free around that is to embrace my own narcissism. Do you know what that was like? Out on the open waters of Facebook into my newsletter list with a subject line that said, I am a narcissist. I mean, there was a time when there's no way I could have done that. But this time I kind of got off on it, I will tell you. It was like so taboo to say such a thing. And I was like, man, working with the Dark Feminine is making me bolder and bolder and like how I'm sharing my work into the world. And that's what I want for everyone else. And that is all from learning how to work with the Dark Feminine. So all that to say, even another example of, I have some judgment with some stuff that's going on out there in the world that feels downright evil to me, right? So I was like, okay, how do I embrace my own evil? And it was like, I am evil. Now, there's lots of ways to get off on something, but this is a simple way. It's to, first of all, just keep repeating it. At some point it starts to lose some of its charge. But then if you can make it sexy, like literally, I could get off on being evil. Now, does that mean I'm really evil? No, because here's the thing. If I'm embracing my evil, then there's probably no way in hell I would actually be evil. Like, do you see how this works? I call it Dark Feminine physics. Obviously, it's probably not literal physics, although I brag that I did pass AP physics back in the day. I don't know that gives me bragging rights to say that Dark Feminine physics is a real thing, but still, I believe that it is because this is how energy works. So let me check in, see how the comments are going. Are there any questions? And then I'd love to finish with, Are there any questions? If you want to add in your wisdom, please do. And if you want to mark anything, like if there's something that's really stood out for you, please do that. And then we'll finish up with an embodiment ritual where we can connect to the Temple Priestesses even more, okay? Hang on. Okay, let's see. I don't know if it's letting me see all the comments. Okay, some lovely compliments. Thank you. I will say the dark feminine definitely brings forth a woman's beauty for sure. As I say to my clients, I'm like, listen, the more you allow yourself to be ugly, the more beautiful you will be. This is, again, the dark feminine physics. Is like when we embrace our shadow, we have more power everywhere. And also too, like, life is, God, I could totally geek out on physics right now. I'm not going to do that now. Maybe we'll do that in one of the other calls. We'll do that tomorrow. I love to geek out on the physics. But I want you to realize, life is built on duality. I mean, the entire universe is built on duality, like yin and yang, positive and negative, like a battery, if you think of it in that way. And so everything, like there's a going up and there's a going down. Everything has a peak and everything has a valley. And if you think about it, the deeper you're willing to go into the valley, the higher you get to go on your peak. So this is part of what's, we don't want to do the darkness in order to get something that doesn't quite work. That's not very feminine. But at the same time, you do get lots out of it, lots of benefits. I love to share fun testimonials we'll talk about that in the third call of like what it looks like to use the dark feminine in business. So we'll talk about that on Thursday. And I want you to realize that there's a real reason of why I believe that the dark feminine is the future of leadership and that we need to learn how to work with her if we're going to survive these times, and if we're going to create something new, we've got to be thinking outside the box. And I believe that the dark feminine is the way. I will also say that, I was talking about the dark feminine when I did the first round of my program in January and February, right? And I kept saying to everyone, listen, I don't know why, but I know that the dark feminine is the conversation and it will be on everyone's lips coming soon. I don't know why, but I'm just telling you that it will be, and you can listen to me now or you can listen to me later. And then what happened? The entire world fell apart into a pandemic like a month or two later. And to me, that's the realm of the dark feminine. Like she is coming in and busting our balls. Okay, that's a very masculine phrase. She is coming in and inviting us to fall apart to old ways so that we can be reborn anew. So this is the time of the dark feminine. So I'm going to keep creating spaces for us to learn how to embrace her more as a sisterhood so it can be fun. I know it can be scary. I know it can be scary, believe me. And isn't it more fun if we do it in sisterhood? And if I can share what I've learned, hard won over the years, being dismantled a million times over. There's a lot that I can share about that. Okay, let me check in on comments or any questions. Someone asked, do you subscribe to a certain lineage? No, I do not. I have been studying the healing arts, as I mentioned earlier, for 20 years. And I've studied many things. I was trained in craniosacral therapy, polarity therapy, shamanic work, Reiki, massage. And so I was kind of a full-on hippie healer for 10 years before I stepped into the coaching world. And then I've also studied lots around sexuality, orgasmic meditation. I've done all of Mama Gina's work, and so around women's empowerment. So I've studied lots of different aspects of the world, if you will. And I personally have always been on the path of wanting to listen from within. So what I teach is bits and pieces of everything that I've learned, but no one has taught me any of this as it is. It's all been learned and hard won. I originally started teaching about the dark feminine 5 years ago as part of another program, and then it started to come through even more. And really, the dark feminine is just a piece of the puzzle of the feminine operating system. It's not the full story. Like, I've been talking about the dark feminine for so long because I knew it was the first program I wanted to bring forward in regard to the feminine operating system, but it's not the full story. Like I will be creating a new program next on the body and the wisdom of the body and the body temple that feels super important in regard to our feminine operating system too. Anyway, all that to say, no, I do not subscribe to a particular lineage. I have not done what do they call them? Priestess initiations of sorts. I was never drawn to them. And even back when I learned shamanic work 20 years ago, which I am very mindful of the cultural appropriation there, this is 20 years ago, I don't resonate with lineages. I'm meant to be a bit of a mad scientist and to weave things together in my own way and listen to what feels right. So that's been my journey, and it's perfectly fine. I know many other people have their own lineage, and that's their path, which is great. Okay, it won't show me all the comments, so I apologize if I missed any, but they're there for others to see. I can't see how to get all of them. It's only showing me the most recent ones, so I apologize for that. I thank you if you did share some of your wisdom, and if you had if you have questions, I can always answer them after if I don't see them now. And someone says, I'm definitely a mad scientist as well. Yeah, I think some of us, like, that's my archetype, you know, it's like I am. One of the modalities I was trained in is called polarity therapy, and it was created by a man named Dr. Randolph Stone, and he studied everything there was. He studied Western medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, yoga, like everything, and then he looked for the common through line, and he found that it was energy and chi or prana, and so he created this whole beautiful modality based off of that, and that was my training. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm kind of like Dr. Stone. That's so cool. So that's my path. Okay, so shall we go into an embodiment ritual? Let me just see if I can pull up comments in this a different way. Okay, not there. Give me 1 second and then we'll go into an embodiment ritual. Okay, nope, doesn't look like that's gonna show me comments. Okay. Such a good, let me look through my notes too, see if I forgot anything. Oh, there was another version of the poison path. Apparently, I think this was in Christian times, called the Sin Eaters. This was talked about in Amanda Palmer's book. And so I believe, I'm not an expert, but I believe that people were hired to eat bread over a grave, I believe, so that they could eat the sin of the person. And somehow they would learn how to transmute that. So you can see all these different expressions of the poison path. And I believe that the dark feminine is behind all of them. And she's calling to us to learn how to work with this poison path so that we can transmute the damn poison that's happening out there in the world right now. Because there's a hell of a lot of it. Okay. Okay, great. I think I got most of it. Okay, so let's go into an embodiment ritual, because I'm a big fan of, you know, we're taught to live from the neck up, and that is just so wrong for us as women because our power lives down in our bodies. And so, you know, I'm sharing this content and we're having fun and geeking out on it, and that's great, but we're taking it into our head. And so we've got to bring the power down into the wisdom down into our body in order to truly get it. So this is, you know, what makes my work different from what's out there is like my 20 years of embodiment study, you know, so I'm constantly weaving between left brain with offering content and then bringing it into the right brain, bringing it down into the body so that we can begin to rewire the brain through the corpus callosum, you know, so that we become more whole and we're not so left brain dominated, because that's how we were taught, right? So let's take it now down into the body. Okay, so we might wiggle around a little bit. You might make some faces. Let's get out of the head. You can push your feet down into the earth. We just want to look for ways to get out of the head and down into our bodies. When I offer a call or a class or I teach, I am very much listening in the moment. I did years of improv, not actor improv, more like, I call it shamanic performance art improv, but I learned how to really surrender in the moment to allow what wants to come through me. So all that to say, I wasn't sure what we were going to do next. So as I'm listening, I'm like, oh, let's do a version of Tonglen, but let's make it like sexy Tonglen. I don't totally resonate with Buddhist practices myself, but let's use that basic practice and then let's bring in our sexiness so we can practice what it feels like to be breathing in darkness and transmuting it and sending it back out as love. Okay. But let's get down into our bodies first. So I invite you to wiggle and wriggle around. Start to close your eyes and bring your attention inward. Make some funny faces. Loosen up that mask. Find your breath. If there's a little sound that wants to come through on the exhale, or if you like to growl like me. Let's imagine, I'm remembering, I haven't done a lot of Tantra classes. I tried, I just never found a teacher that spoke to me, but I did do one years ago. And we were invited to imagine that we imagine our eyeballs in our sockets, and then we imagine that the eyeballs fall backward into our throat. I just thought of that as a way to get out of our head. And then we could imagine that the eyeballs fall down into our heart and start to come into the body. And then imagine that the eyeballs fall down into, let's say, our power center, our solar plexus. Feel all that power there. And then let the eyeballs fall down into your second chakra, or your womb, whether it's physical or metaphoric, energetic. And then let our eyeballs fall down into our pelvic floor. Let's feel ourselves start to settle, almost surrendering to the effects of gravity. Imagining that as we let go and allow ourselves to fall into gravity, that the earth rises up to meet us and holds us, and we are held. And so I'm going to invite us and guide us to get connected to our power and our sex, because so much of our raw feminine power is connected here. Now, we all have different words for our genitals and our sex. Could be yoni, vagina, pussy. I personally use pussy in my personal life, so I'm going to use that word. But if that's not one you like, you can translate it to whatever works for you. So I'm going to invite us to imagine that we can breathe in and out of our pelvic floor and pussy, anchoring our awareness there as a way to say hello to our base of our being. And then as a way to get connected, I'm going to invite you to imagine that you can put your attention and isolate it and put your attention on labia. See if you can imagine just feeling into your labia right now. And then I invite you to imagine that you can isolate and put your attention on clitoris. And then I invite you to imagine that you can put your attention on the vaginal canal. Just notice and feel and breathe with these areas. And then imagine you can put your attention on cervix. Again, if you have a physical cervix, or if you can tune into the energetic cervix. And then lastly, I invite you to imagine you can put your attention on womb. Again, the physical womb or the energetic womb. Beautiful. Okay, so as a way to access our turn on, I'm going to invite you to keep breathing with your pelvic floor and pussy. And I'm going to invite you to bring to mind someone you have a crush on, that you feel an attraction toward. And it might be your partner, or it might not be. It might be like a celebrity crush of some sort, who knows? And it's not important who it is. It's just we're using them as a tool and a teacher. So call to mind someone you feel an attraction toward and see what happens in pussy, and see if that brings in some tingles or some warmth, some electricity, just as a way to activate, and to really notice that we can create our own turn on in any given moment, and that it is our responsibility to be in our own turn on, not anyone else's responsibility. Okay, great. And so then lastly, before we get to the Tonglen part, I invite you to just play around and pulse areas in pussy. Not necessarily a Kegel, because those can be a little patriarchal, but just imagine that you can pulse. You might imagine you can pulse just clitoris. You know, and by pulse, I mean like flex it like it's a muscle, if you will, kind of like a Kegel, but isolating it. Or you might imagine just pulsing your labia. Or maybe you imagine pulsing just front and back of your vaginal canal, or left and right. Just sort of play around. It's a way to get connected. Beautiful. Okay, so then now let's just make sure we're connected to our hearts before we breathe in the darkness. So bringing your attention now to breathe in and out of your heart. And this is a little bit of heart math that I learned a million years ago. So bring to mind someone that you love, and bring in the feeling state of that love, not the thought of it, but the feeling state of that love as you breathe in and out of your heart. And this is a way to help anchor you there in your heart's power. Beautiful. Okay, now, so just have a little bit of a hint of notice the connection between heart and pussy, just so that we're powered up and filled with our own power in this moment. Okay, so now we're gonna breathe in some darkness. So I invite you to imagine something going on in the world that feels dark to you. Now, it could be a particular person. It could be a certain ism going on in the world. It could be a certain ailment of the world. Whatever it is, let it be something that you feel passionate about. And you're going to imagine it out there in the world, and you might sort of see the darkness. And keeping your attention on pussy and on heart, I'm going to invite you to imagine that you breathe in this darkness. And I would breathe it in through the nose and just see what that feels like. Breathing in the darkness. Now you might imagine that you swirl it around in your body if you want to kind of play with this. The traditional practice is you breathe in the darkness and then you breathe out love and light. They don't ever tell you how to do that though, by the way. But, so let's play with it here. So maybe experimenting in the moment, breathe in the darkness and let it swirl all the way down to your pelvic floor, pussy, your genitals, and add in some of that turn on so that it begins to alchemize a little, and then breathe it out, I believe, through the mouth. So let's practice that. We're going to breathe in darkness through the nose, let it swirl down in with, mix in with our turn on, or your heart if you feel more connected to heart, like if you want to swirl it around with heart and love, or you can swirl it around with pussy and turn on, and then breathe it out through the mouth as love, like as a gift and offering to the world, using your own channel to do this. So I'll be quiet for a few moments and let you experiment and play and explore. Notice what this is like for you. Can you really feel the darkness coming in? Can you feel how you can literally apply your love from your heart or your turn on from pussy and that it transmutes it? Can you feel how you then breathe out love and turn on instead of darkness? And can you get turned on by it at all? Can you fall in love with the darkness at all? So let's say 30 more seconds, explore, and then we'll come back together to complete. Okay, find a way to come to completion. And to finish up, let's make sure we clean ourselves off a little bit. So I invite you to imagine that there is a golden waterfall of light and unconditional love raining down over your head and filling up your being, washing you clean, like scrubbing bubbles moving through your body. So allow yourselves to be washed clean and filled up by this golden waterfall of light. Okay. Excellent. So then wiggle fingers and toes. And let's come back together. And how was that for you? Anyone like to share their experience before we complete? I only just saw the text from my team to talk a little louder, so sorry about that if it was a little soft. Okay. Anyone want to share? That was awesome. That is not a practice I have done before. And I think that that's something we need to be doing moving forward. And I definitely prefer the version, the sexy version versus the normal Buddhist version myself. Anyone else want to share what that was like for them before we complete? Okay, well, I'm waiting to see if anyone wants to chime in. Let me know if you're watching the replay too. Like, oh, I'd love to hear, like, what was your favorite part from today? It's a lovely way to begin to digest some of this. Like, what was your favorite part? What was your takeaway or an aha that you had? Again, let's keep sort of digesting this as a sisterhood. So I'd love to hear whether you're live or watching a replay. And then also we're going to continue the call of the dark feminine. We're going to meet again tomorrow, same time, same place. And we're going to look at dark feminine as activism and leadership, because I really believe that the dark feminine is the future of leadership. And I think we all need to learn how to work with her moving forward, you know, for our own benefit and for the benefit of the world. I mean, your business is going to benefit like crazy too. So we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we'll meet again, and it'll be about entering the dark feminine temple. And you can find out more about the dark feminine experience for women leaders. Doors are open now. They close on November 18th. And we're sending out the call of like, who wants to gather with us in this sacred space to do this deep work as a sisterhood? So we'll talk more about that on Thursday. So if you want to hear details or ask any questions, please do come to that. Okay, any other? Someone says, I feel energized. Someone says, very powerful. Someone says, alchemy in the body and energy, so powerful. I love it. Definitely want to use the sexy version again. Sexy Tonglen, yo. Someone says, that was very intense. I felt like I was choking. Whew, okay, that's deep, right? So it might, this is where I get so passionate about like us learning how to work with the dark feminine, because it's like a muscle of going to the gym, right? Like we get better and better at it the more we do, and the more that we clear of our own darkness. And again, darkness is not bad. Like what happens, maybe we'll geek out on this tomorrow around like the power, but like energy is either moving or it isn't. And when energy is moving, there's health. When energy is not moving, there is not health. And so part of like my mad scientist is about just getting energy moving again. And when we suppress our emotions, energy is not moving. When we tighten and constrict, energy is not moving. And that doesn't support our power, right? So that's why I believe the dark feminine comes in to teach us how to get into all that power. Anyway, all that to say, in regard to the choking, you know, we have to learn how to modulate things for our own systems and learn like what works for us. So perhaps you could do it in a gentler way next time, or maybe just think of something that's a little less dark, if you will. Like it's all about being gentle and compassionate to our own bodies and beings and nervous systems, right? So, and right on that you tried it and that you shared with us. Thank you so much. And we're all learning how to do this together, right? Anyone else want to comment? Any last questions before we complete? Hey now, hour on the dot. I'm impressed. Okay, looks like we're good. All right, so thank you for being here with me today. I so appreciate you and your presence. Can't do this alone. We need all of us in sisterhood to be doing it in whatever way feels best for us in our own path. And please continue the journey with me into the dark feminine tomorrow. All right, everyone, take care.